the GS GSA, an unreliable, crappy car. Now, when I was around in my 20s, these cars were very cheap and we didn't have any money. And we liked the technique and the feeling of the car and how it handled and everything. So that was the choice. We drove GS, GSA as daily drives year round. And for being in Sweden at the west coast, that was a pretty stupid choice because honestly, the GS GSA has a pretty crappy heating system. The problem isn't that it's air cooled, because you can get a pretty nice warmth or heating in a car with air cooled cooling system. That's not the problem. The problem is that they choose to put the heat chambers pretty down low on the engine, and they also have heating coming from the cooling fan blowing through the engine, the cylinders and everything, and that air are like preheated from the cylinders, the engine, when it reaches the heat chambers, and then it goes into the cabin. And this oil smell comes generally from the engine and not the heat chambers. So, like on the 2CV, you have a heat chamber only on the exhaust system. And these, I have never encountered a 2CV that has this oily smell in the heating. It just smells hot, warm metal. Normally doesn't smell at all. So in order to get unsmelling, unstinky heating in a GS, people tend to blame the O-rings on the oil return tubes. Well, that's correct. And they change that, and they still have this thicky, bad smell anyway. Especially when you slow down and taking a turn, it comes back, even if it's where you just drive a straight road and you have the heating on, and it's okay, you can stand it. But as soon as you break down, slow down, make a turn, go through a roundabout, whatever, that just disturbs this float, you get the smell back. So in order to fix that, you need to get rid of the air blowing through the engine, period. That's what you need to do. So we have a coming project on that. Back to the question, is it an unreliable, crappy car? Well, when they were 10, 15, 18 years old, with this typical maintenance they got, a typical car got, a cheap car got, of course they were crappy. Natural. But the thing is that I can very easily count every time I had a hydraulic breakdown on a GS, and I can't count how many GSs I've owned. I don't remember. Once a friend of mine, this is like more than 20 years ago, it was in the 90s, we were out in the town and suddenly he asks me, how many cars have you owned, Chris? And I was like, oh, how I get out of this? I didn't remember. So I said, well, maybe we should count how many Citroens I got. I owned. No, that wasn't easy either. Well, okay, let's focus on the GS because that's the GS. That's the Citroen I like. So anyway, I grabbed a napkin from somewhere. I borrowed a pen from somewhere, and I started to remember. Okay, first one was the red wagon I bought at the scrapyard with the rear axle breakdown, so I drove it home on 3 wheels, which actually was my first driving experience with the GS. That was on 3 wheels. Only that only is a pretty crazy thing. So anyway, that was the one, and then I think it was a Brun Cigale Palace, and then it was, and then I got lost. So I managed to track it down backwards 27 GSs, and then I was lost. This was like 1997 or something, 96 or something. I didn't own any GS by then. And 20 years ago I bought a blue one, and then I bought a green one, and then it snowballed again. So I don't know, but well over 30, maybe 40. And I can easily count those moments when I had a hydraulic breakdown on a GS, because it never happens. If it isn't that rusty, so something just snaps off because it's so weak. But no. The breakdowns I have had is rusted through rear axle arms. That's it. Otherwise, it has been like I had a red 84 X1, and I drove it for, I think it was at least a year, with the sounding drive shaft, and it was knocking in for at least 3 or 4 months. It was sounding when driving straight. And then one night, rainy November, I was heading home. It was dark. I took a 45-degree turn, and it just snapped off, and I was just sitting there. So I had to call my friend, and he was towing me home. And when I took that apart, it was blue. So that was probably, it was pretty hot there before it broke down. Otherwise, no. CXs. I've owned a bunch of CXs, and they have let me down quite a bit, but never the GS or GSA. But the main problem with the GS is the heating system. Today it's not an issue. We're driving those cars summertime. But yesterday, actually, and this is not about heating, it's about reliability. I still drive. We're closing up to mid-October now, and I'm still driving my blue GS 74, and that's a car I've just tossed together. I haven't been that. I haven't done everything by the book, more by my book, my head. And yesterday it was raining, it was dark, it was a typical Swedish crappy October evening. And I was driving home, and we have this pretty long road here. It's more than 10 kilometers through the woods. It's curvy, it's dark, there's no light there, and you meet people that are so confused with driving their big easy cars that is turning and everything, so they forget to switch off their headlights or their main beams. And anyway, I was driving home, and I forgot it was a 50-year-old car. It just goes straight, and you take the turns and you just drive it. And it's like, and the wipers go, and the heating is on, and the heating smells and everything, but the car just goes. It's like what the GS asks me kind of, what's the big deal here? We're just driving. It's 1980. What are you complaining about? Don't be so so. And I haven't looked under the bonnet on that car for 2 months. It's just parked outside here. I run some errands, I go places. It's mostly parked, but I'm mostly at home. But I go places and I start a car. Go. There's no problems. It's no big issue. Of course, if I continue this behavior during this winter, I would probably have a pretty sad GS in April. So, but it's not an unreliable car. It has its issues, and the GS heating system, that's the next thing I'm gonna tackle, because I can't stand this smell, and it's not healthy. Imagine having those brake pads with asbestos in them, and they're pretty close to the heating system, so you probably get some asbestos fibers into the heating system and the oil. So no, it's not at all healthy. I remember those years in early 90s when we drove those cars, and you always had to have a handkerchief in the car, because during wintertime you had a defroster on, and this oily air coming from the engine, it created a gray mist inside the window, this emulsion of oil and water. So you always had to wipe that off. That is, in my opinion, pretty crappy. So, yeah, a crappy heating system. Yeah. But the rest of the car, if you can think away, don't pay attention to rust. Let's say rust doesn't exist. Let's say we're down in South France or in Spain or something. Then this car is just, if you just maintain it, it will probably just go and go and go. And by maintaining, I mean choosing the right oil for the engine, changing the LHM fluid, doing these things that the factory actually tells you to do. Because if you don't do it, and that's what people didn't do, they get a crappy car. It's not the car's fault. It's the owner. Okay. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.